Welcome back, Irish fans. Breaking Down Braves Boys podcast. Notre Dame got some great news today. Landed Niagara guard and one of the better transfer guards on the market, Marcus Hammond, to be their first transfer portal addition of the offseason and first new player in general. He's a 6'3", 173-pound guard with 1 year of eligibility remaining, if I've done my calculations right. In 2021-2022, averaged 18.1 points per game, 2.9 assists per game, 2.2 turnovers per game, a little over 4 rebounds a game, shot 43% from the field and 37% from three-point range. This recruitment really came down to Notre Dame and Georgetown. Georgetown seemed to be somewhat of a hot destination for transfers lately. He visited there last weekend and was planning on visiting Kansas or Rutgers. I'm not sure if that actually amounted to anything, though. I don't think it did. But then visited Notre Dame this weekend along with other transfer Grant Basile for the Blue Gold game weekend, and canceled his last visit to Kansas State and ended up committing to Notre Dame. So huge recruiting win for Mike Brey and staff. Didn't beat out any crazy teams, but still some solid high major teams and two teams in Georgetown and Kansas State who have been really hot destinations for transfers throughout the offseason. So big get for Notre Dame, one of the best scorers in the portal, and has done it against high major opponents in the past. 22 points against Ohio State, shot 50% from the field, 7 for 14, 4 for 9 from 3, had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 turnovers. So definitely a good outing there against guys like Malachi Branham. Justice Suing was on him for a few plays, Michi Johnson, and some solid guards at Ohio State were on him, and was able to use his explosiveness and get to his spots even against high major competition like that. And then against Xavier, had 25 points on 9 for 7 from the field, 4 for 10 from 3, 6 rebounds, assist, and 8 turnovers. So certainly not the Mike Brey assist to turnover you'd want, but generally 2.9 to 2.2, not horrible. Certainly something that they're going to want to improve on with him. But we'll get to his playmaking in a minute. The main appeal with him, though, is obviously scoring. It's a guy who you can really tell watch James Harden, kind of want to start it there. With a lot of his moves, he's so good at manipulating guys in isolation, gets to pretty much any spot he wants on the floor, and can really shoot it, shot 37% from 3. And that's not a Trey Wirtz 37% from 3 where most of it's catch and shoot looks that are wide open. This guy is a guy who's getting his own looks off the bounce, taking shots with guys in his face, and I think he's a better straight-up shooter than 37% from 3. It's just that a lot of his shots were bad shots, and I don't know if that's really his fault. He has a tendency to take some, but was a super high-volume guy at Niagara, and they needed him to be. They certainly weren't discouraging that. It's something that was welcome for them, and he was their entire offense. I think the playmaking got lost in translation a bit, but I do think he has some ability there. In terms of scoring, it's a guy who I think can make the leap to high major basketball just because of his quickness. I think a lot of what got lost in translation was Trey Wirtz was his first step, and kind of his overall quickness and agility I don't think is as high as a guy like Marcus Hammond and some of the guys that have translated into good off the dribble scorers at higher levels of college basketball. I think Hammond's a guy who can really get to whatever spot he wants against most guards in college basketball, and I think that's really valuable for Notre Dame to have another guy who can go get his own look off the bounce. They have a few in Cormac Ryan, J.J. Starling, and to an extent Trey Wirtz, but it's always welcome to have another one. There is an argument that sometimes there's too many chefs in the kitchen, but if you want to use that argument, use it with this past year's Notre Dame team. It certainly worked out for them, and that's going to be probably the main thing with this group and Marcus Hammond in general. Can they keep it moving? Can they really mold together as an offensive group? There's a lot of guards who are really talented. Luckily for them, only 3 of them are guys who take a lot of dribbles to get to their spots, which would be Cormac, JJ, and Hammond. I do think Hammond is pretty efficient in his movements, though. Seems like he's not taking the air out of the ball like Cormac did at times a few years ago, but he's going to have to know when to keep it moving, and in Niagara, he kind of had the freedom to dribble the air out of the ball if he wanted to, and because they need him to create so badly. But Notre Dame has other guys who can create and other cooks in the kitchen. So I really like Hammond's offensive game as well, specifically scoring. I like his offensive game a lot. One of the more talented transfers in the portal, really good shooter, guy who can get to his spots, and guy who can finish around the rim a little bit, even against high major bigs. So I think there's a lot to be excited about in terms of what Hammond can bring as a scorer. Probably Notre Dame's second best off the dribble scorer. I think Cormac may have an argument there, but I think Hammond and JJ Starling are neck and neck for their best off the dribble scorer, and he's shown he can do it against high levels of competition. So there's a lot to like in terms of Hammond as a scorer. Really crafty, good at manipulating defenders, and gets to his spots, can hit shots at a high level. And a lot of those high volume guys you see at low majors have all the moves, have all the quickness, but can't really convert. They can't finish that well. They aren't that great of shooters. But what I like about Hammond is high three-point percentage, and I do think he has some craftiness around the rim that can help him at the high major level. He wasn't that efficient from two, shot 43% from the field, and 37% from three. So you got to think there's a bit of a drop off there in 2-point percentage, but certainly is one of the more talented players in the portal offensively, and a guy who, man, has a really high ceiling on that end, and I think can translate to the high major level, especially with other good players around him. And that's going to help his distributing as well. I think Hammond is a guy who, you look at the stat sheet, 2.9 assists per game to 2.2 turnovers. If he's a combo guard, I think they're going to probably want to use him more point guard, because they don't really want to go point guard by committee. They want a veteran there to kind of take some of the burden off of their other guys who have proven to be a little bit better off the ball. But the stats don't look like a traditional Mike Brey point guard, and I think they do have the potential to go up a little bit. I think generally it's a little bit easier to be playmaker at the high major level when you have better players around you. I think Hammond's stats are a little deceiving. I think he does have the ability, or does have the tendency to turn it over a little bit, but I also think he sees the floor really well and is good at kind of manipulating 2-on-1 situations or plays where he gets by a guy and then there's a guy in the corner, or there's a big on the dunker's post. I think Hammond's a guy who does see the floor pretty well. The stats don't really show that, but there's a few plays every game where he makes a really nice find or makes a play out of a ball screen or on the fast break, sees a guy in a good matchup or a guy that's open. And I think he's shown flashes of being a great playmaker, but throughout his career has always been a guy who's really looked to score first. And it's been a score first guard his entire career, and I don't think that's really going to change, but they're going to need him to be more of a playmaker than he has been in his college career. And I think they can really unlock that. I think they're going to have to go point guard by committee, but Hammond's going to probably get the majority of the touches there. And I think he has the highest ceiling as a point guard out of anyone except maybe JJ Starling, who I'm not sure I really trust at this point to be their primary ball handler. Hammond's a guy who I think, like I said, has the potential to be a really good passer at the next level, but has to buy in and has to be a guy who's willing to start the chain of events, but not always finish it for Notre Dame. What I mean by that, get by your guy, manipulate a ball screen, but be willing to make that extra pass. And I think he will be. I think he's going to have to know when to keep the ball moving, when to not be an isolation scorer, when to kind of fit into what Notre Dame wants to do. And to keep the offense flowing like it did last year, they're going to need him to do that. And I think this team has a high ceiling offensively in terms of how they can run it. They can keep it flowing. They have a lot of vets like Trey Wirtz, Cormac Ryan, Dane Goodwin, and Hammond's even a fifth-year guy. I think he's mature enough to know that he's not coming here to be an isolation scorer who's going to be their entire offense. They're going to need him to be more than that. They're going to need him to be a playmaker, and that's got to translate. That's the biggest question with him. How does his point guard skills translate? Notre Dame was probably going to be fine if they just had Cormac, JJ, Trey, Dane as secondary scorers next to the point guard who could create for him. But now you got a guy like Hammond who you're really going to need to kind of put the whole puzzle together. And guys like Dane Goodwin and Nate Laszewski and even Trey Wirtz are really going to be helped by that. Having a guy who can hit the guys in the corners, hit the guys off ball screens is huge. And Prentice Hub was integral to those guys' success. Marcus Hammond is going to really show how important Prentice Hub was if he can't make that jump as a playmaker. I think I think it's certainly going to take some time, especially coming from a league like his. He was three-time All-League in the MAAC. I don't know if you say the MAC like the other MAC, but is a guy who does a lot of things well, but also has some questions. The playmaking is a question. I think he has some technical work that he needs to work on defensively. Anthony Solomon's going to probably try his best with that. I think getting into a stance a little bit more, kind of working off ball screens a little bit more defensively is going to be something that he can improve on. But he does have solid length. He's quick, and I think he'll buy in defensively. So certainly won't be a liability, but I think he's a guy who has a little bit of room to go defensively. Some technical work could really help him, but the scoring is obviously what they wanted from him, and the reason why they took his commitment and the reason why other high majors were interested in him being the guy for them. And I think he would have been the guy at a Georgetown next to Brandon Murray. That's a really good backcourt. I think one that maybe he could have even been a bigger contributor in, but now he's going to have to play with other guys and going to have to embrace more the role in all likelihood as a number one point guard and a guy who can't just be an isolation scorer and the entire offense. He's going to have to get other talented players involved. And sometimes that's a struggle for guys who take a step up. And certainly going to be something that we talk about all off season. Point guard play was huge. The reason Kansas finally started to hit their stride at the end of the season was because of DeJuan Harris and Remy Martin starting to hit their stride. And DeJuan Harris really contributed defensively and got everyone involved, kept the ball moving, and got looks for guys like Ochai Agbaji down the stretch. And if Notre Dame can get that out of Marcus Hammond, they have an unbelievable ceiling offensively. And this year kind of showed what that Mike Brey offense can look like with a good point guard and a good secondary distributor. Notre Dame has a good point guard. If Marcus Hammond translates in terms of a playmaker, and they have another good playmaker in J.J. Starling, if all works out there. So ceiling is high. Things are going to have to come together, though, and there'll probably be growing pains. It's not going to happen overnight, but as we get later into 2023, things could look much better in Notre Dame's backcourt. So big gift for Notre Dame. Mike Brey and staff did a good job with this one. I don't think it was really a guy that filled a need. I think as a true point guard, which is really what they seem to be looking for, I think Hammond's more of a combo guard. I think they were looking for more of like a Dylan Penn type guy, or I'm trying to think of, I can't think off the top of my head who else they reached out to. They committed elsewhere, but Dylan Penn is a guy who I think would have been a little bit better as just a straight up point guard, but you watch Hammond's tape and you see what he can do off the bounce, and you see the flashes of playmaking ability he has, and you watch him and it's really hard to see a way you turn him down after all you can see on tape of him, especially against high majors. And I think that helped him get some high major interest. If he laid an egg in those two games, I think his recruiting may have been a little different, but those games were really impressive, although he did have some turnovers in them. He's going to have to cut that down as well. But overall, Hammond's a guy who has an incredible offensive ceiling, solid defensive ceiling as well. Going to have to work on becoming a lower volume, higher efficiency guy, especially from 2-point range, and also a guy who takes a little bit better shots, a guy who makes a little bit better decisions. But I think those things are going to be easier now that he has other good players next to him. It was for Blake Wesley over the years. You could kind of tell junior year of high school, he didn't really have much faith in his teammates, but as the years went on, started trusting him more, and you could really see the playmaking start to burst through over the years. And Marcus Hammond, I think, kind of signifies the end of Blake Wesley at Notre Dame, if that wasn't already going to be the case. But as a guy who could maybe not fill his shoes completely, but could be a really good player to kind of help fill the hole left by Blake Wesley and Prentice Hub. And having a backcourt of J.J. Starling, Marcus Hammond, Cormac Ryan, Trey Wirtz, Dane Goodwin, and then potentially Jared Konechny down the stretch is something that Notre Dame fans should be really excited about, and something that Notre Dame staff seems to be really excited about as well. So I appreciate you guys watching. Big news for Notre Dame, and the front court's got to get shored up now. Got a few big decisions we're waiting on. Nate Laszewski, Grant Basile are two guys that could join Notre Dame over the next few months, and then it's all up to the guys currently on the roster that are sitting behind those guys to solidify the third big role, or maybe even the second big role if one of those guys doesn't end up at Notre Dame. But huge move for Notre Dame. Still work to be done this offseason, and I will be covering all of it over the next few weeks and next few months. So I appreciate you guys watching. God bless. Hope everyone has a great week, and hope to be back soon with some more news to cover. Appreciate you guys watching. Peace.